Hello family, thank you for tuning into this video today. Hey look, I'm doing something a little different and actually very exciting. I think it's gonna definitely help a lot of people that follow my content and newbies as well looking to buy in regional markets. And a lot of the time people are very confused as to where to buy in particular across various different regional markets. So if you are looking to buy right now or you're considering investing in a regional market, I think you're going to get some tremendous value out of what's going to be covered here today. I'm going to do a video on how to pick the best regional location to invest. So stick around, guys. I'm super excited to bring this video to you. So before we dive in, my name is Joyce Bassini. I am the owner and head of research of Life Buyers Agency. And Life Buyers Agency has two subsidiary brands in Tropical Life in North Queensland. So we service the Cairns, Townsville, and Port Douglas property market there, and we provide buyers agency services on the ground in that market. And we also have Capricorn Life Buyers Agency in Central Queensland servicing Bundaberg, Gladstone, Mackay, and Rockhampton as well. So I suppose if you fall into the category of an investor that needs help navigating Central Queensland or North Queensland and you want to buy the better quality assets in the marketplace, feel free to reach out to me and the team. I'm more than happy to connect you up with some really good opportunities. We bought more than $200 million worth of residential real estate across these two marketplaces, and we've been around for a very long time now, and we provide boots on ground perspective. So if you are someone that needs help or just wants to get a really good result, feel free to reach out to me and the team. You can visit us on that website there, those two websites, and give us a call on that number and schedule a call with me or one of my team members. We'll be super excited to see if we might be able to give you a hand, guys. Thank you. So I've just mentioned we provide buyers agency services for clients around Central Queensland and North Queensland. So when a lot of the clients come to us, they say, "Hey Troy, I've got $500,000 and I'm looking to invest at the moment, but look, I don't know whether I want to invest in Townsville. I don't know whether I want to invest in Mackay. I don't know whether I want to invest in Cairns or if they're down in Central Queensland, they don't know whether they want to invest in Bundy, Rocky, or Mackay. So they have a lot of trouble figuring out where is the best region to invest. And generally, when they come to us, what we're first and foremost doing is having a discussion just like this one here. Is step one, figuring out your situation. Because once you figure out your situation, that generally dictates where you end up in as a location. And the framework we're generally looking at this through is this framework here. So number one, we're looking at what's your budget, right? What's your budget? What type of goals are you looking to achieve? Are you looking to achieve a passive income goal? Are you looking to make short-term, long-term capital growth? What does that look like specifically? What is your risk appetite? Are you someone that has an established portfolio already and you can take a bit more risk, or you're just starting out, you might want to just sort of have a low risk investment. What's your investment strategy? Are you looking for cash flow? Are you looking for growth? Are you looking to renovate and add value? Are you looking to buy, hold, and then develop? Like all of those sort of key things determines the location you end up in, guys, for when you invest. So that's the first step that we do when we I suppose, speak with and meet with clients. And I think if you adopt that same framework, it's also going to really help you in coming up with a location to invest in. Because at the end of the day, all of the regional and sub-regional locations across Queensland caters to different types of investors. So what you need to do is establish which regional location provides the following here. So number one, from your budget, the best bang for buck, right? Because let's say a $500,000 budget might not get you something really good in Cairns, but it definitely gets you something very good in Rockhampton. So that can determine itself, just budget alone, in the location you end up in. Goal, it comes back to, not goal, sorry, one that best suits your strategy. So if you're looking at, let's say, buying a property on a larger land parcel and your budget again is $500,000, let's say you wanted a couple of acres or a couple of hectares to buy, hold, and then develop into a subdivision at a later date, getting into, let's say, a big regional hub like Townsville, Mackay, Cairns, might not be that great because a $500,000 budget doesn't get you a big piece of land. Whereas maybe going into a sub-regional location like Bowen, like Ingham, those sub-regional markets where your dollar can stretch a lot further might also better suit your strategy. So you can see how budget and now strategy starts to determine where you may or may not invest. And then also you have to consider a location that you believe can help achieve your goal. So if you've set a goal for, let's say, capital growth, for example, then you want to make sure that location has a proven track record of capital growth and has a lot of the lead indicators and good fundamentals so that you can continue to get capital growth if you did invest there. Whereas, there are sub-regional markets, for example, in regional Queensland, even established big regional markets that don't have necessarily the best track records of capital growth. So they may not be the market that might help achieve your goal also. So that could be another thing that determines where you may or may not invest. And then the risk appetite also. So you have to consider the downside risk, what your appetite is. Are you someone that, let's say, has an established portfolio of properties already? So you can take a risk in a market that may be volatile, maybe is going through a boom, but it's never boomed before. So you have to be considerate of what your risk appetite is, because that now could also determine where you invest. But most of the people that come to us, we're generally dealing with first, second, third time investors. So we're generally pushing them more towards the big established regional hubs like Cairns, Townsville, Rockhampton, Mackay, Bundaberg, etc. And then for those with a higher risk appetite, we tend to go into sub-regional markets where they can have a bit of a play. But more often than not, 9 times out of 10, we try and stick to the big regional hubs. So this is the first step, guys. And this first step is going to really help you determine what location you invest in. If you use this framework, it's going to help you really shortlist and start to cull where you may or may not invest in regional Australia or regional Queensland for that matter. So after you've figured out your situation, right, and you might have culled a few regions off the list, but now you've sort of narrowed down on one or two, three regions. But what you need to do now is dive in and dissect that particular region to see if that region stacks up as an investment proponent. So when selecting a region, you need to understand its macro fundamentals, right? So once you dissect and understand the macro fundamentals, you can then establish which is the best region to invest in. So when dissecting these macro fundamentals, me and my team in-house, we're looking at these macro fundamentals, and we'll go through all of these macro fundamentals as part of this presentation today through the WWW framework. So the Triple W framework is where the market has been, what it's doing right now, and where it's going. And we'll look at and apply that lens through all of these various categories here when we start to dissect the region itself to see whether it stacks up as an investment proponent. So these are the sort of the key things that you want to work through, guys, when determining which is the best region. So number one is the history and track record of that region. You then want to look in and look at the market cycle and time, whether or not it is the right time to buy in this particular region. You want to look at the market size. Is it a big enough market to invest in? You want to evaluate the economy of that area. Is it a healthy economy? What's going on there? You want to look at the population and movements and what's the existing population, what's happening overall there. Is the population growing or is it decreasing? We want to look at the affordability of that market relative to the people that live there, relative to the people that are moving in, etc. We're going to explore that as well. We're going to want to understand what are some of the lifestyle drivers in that market. What's bringing people through the area, what's keeping people in that area. Want to understand what your budget can do and what value for money you can get in that market in particular. I want to look at the new supply in the market, because if you look at it, if supply is an overabundant thing in that market, particularly new supply, that can be a big issue, particularly to throw a market from a seller's market to a buyer's market and could erode away any potential gains you're looking at making there. So you need to look at the new supply pipeline, and we're going to show you the framework that we use and the key data we're looking at. And then risks also. You want to look at different risks that could go wrong in that market. So if you apply all of these things as part of your research, guys, I think you're going to really be able to pick the best proponent slash region to invest in, particularly in regional Queensland. And this is the lens that we're applying when we buy every property for our clients. All right, so when you're evaluating a potential region, you want to go in and look specifically at its history and track record. So, for example, certain regional hubs have a different history and track record to each other. So it's important to go over this data and look at which one is the market you prefer based on what this data is telling you. Because let's say two examples are, let's say Mackay and Gladstone are historically more volatile markets than places like Rockhampton and Bundaberg in central Queensland. So and this is by looking at its track record, and the track record data will tell you this. So when you are looking at a market to invest in, I think it's very important that you revisit its track record. And when we like to revisit its track record, what we're doing there is analyzing the data of the median house price and the median rental price over a 15-year period. And what we're trying to do then is by looking at that data over that period, try and get an understanding of what that data is telling us, whether that's a good stable market over that period where prices have gone up over a period of time, and if it has gone back, it has only dipped slightly and retracted slightly or stagnated for only a short period of time, but it's incrementally grown over that time horizon, or has it been one that's been volatile in nature? So where median house price 1 year is at 400,000 and a couple of years later it's down to $200,000. So that will be able to sway us whether or not we should invest in that market by looking at the track record. But looking at the median house price and the median rental price is good enough data to establish whether or not these are the markets that are worthwhile investing in, and obviously then establishing the stability and volatility of those markets. So you can look at different platforms like hashtag RP Data Price Finder or On the House to get some historical data around its median house price. That's going to really help you guys figure out what's going on there. And on the median rental price front and how that's performed over time, you can also use those same platforms there as well. But it takes a bit of fiddling around and a really good eye to sort of see the peaks and troughs and the trends. But when you're looking at graphs, I think you can see pretty clearly more often than not that a market is volatile where it goes up and down, or a market's quite stable where it's kicked along nicely incrementally over a certain period of time. So if you can look at the track record of an area, guys, and look at these key components, so the median house price, the median rental price, and then figure out if it's a stable or volatile market based on those two metrics, it's really going to help you determine and understand whether or not this is a market that you should invest in or not. The next thing you want to be looking at is the market cycle. So, when we have clients come to us and let's say they've got $550,000 and they've, let's say, been fixated on a market like Bundaberg, we would say, oh, Bundaberg's probably a little bit more on this along the cycle in terms of it peaking than, let's say, Townsville right now. So we might go Townsville instead of Bundaberg based on the timing right now, or the property clock slash property market cycle. So when we're analyzing this data for our clients, what we're trying to understand here is whether there is current opportunity to make money in this market in the short term, in the next 1 to 3 years, because you want to make sure that you get short-term growth as well when you're investing, because that allows you to extract the equity out, rinse and repeat on subsequent purchases. But if you buy a property in the right location, the right pocket, right street, right property with good fundamentals, you're going to naturally get the long-term growth as well. And most markets tend to go up anyway over the long term, but when you're timing a market, it's important that you're looking at the cycle of the market to make sure that you're coming in to really maximize your short-term growth as well. So we believe, if a market has peaked or if it doesn't offer good value for money, we will stay away from it. And that's basically what we have been doing ever since we've started buying property for clients in and around regional Queensland. So what you want to be looking at to establish what's going on in terms of the market and its cycle is you can look at property clock data. There's a lot of online forums that, if you search in property clock, let's say Rockhampton, I'm pretty sure you'll be able to find something like that online somewhere. So that's probably going to really help you understand where exactly along um, the cycle it is. I think the DSR score also could potentially help you as well, figuring out what the property clock looks like. Looking at sort of how much has the market already grown, I think is going to really help you as well. So over the last 3 years, if you've seen the median house price go from $450 to $600,000, then you probably know, oh, it's had a lot of growth there. So what you really need to be doing there is looking for signs of if it's slowing down, and if it's slowing down or flatlining or retracting, that's probably when you know then the market has grown too much and is starting to probably not be a really good ideal time to enter into that market. So I think that's going to really help you by making observations of that data over the last couple of years to really figure out what your next move would be. And then affordability, I think, also comes into play here as well. Is there still affordability in that market? I think it's a question you should definitely ask yourself, because even if a market goes from, let's say, 400 to 650 over let's say a 3 or 4 year period, is 600,000 or 650 still an affordable price point for majority of the people looking to transact in that market? Because maybe that 650 can get to 800 over the next sort of 1 to 4 years as well there. So there's still even more room for capital growth there. So you want to ask that question as well. Is there still affordability in that market to establish if it's still a good time to enter into it as per that cycle? And you want to sort of figure out then what and who are driving the markets there as well. So if it's one-off projects that is creating stimulus in the economy, and that stimulus is only short term, then maybe if you're on the tail end, if that project is on its tail end, maybe it's not the best time to be buying there, as majority of the people that are active in this market or buying in this market or living in this market, transacting, for example, they're moving on as that project wraps up. So you want to make sure that you get some qualitative information around who and what is driving that market as well, because that can determine how long or short that cycle is going to last. And we've had cases where Gladstone, for example, had a big employer in town when the gas boom was going off there, 10, 15 years ago, and you had an inundation of people. Upwards of 4,000 or 5,000 people came into that market specifically for this project, and it obviously put a lot of upward pressure on the housing market, and obviously that place boomed. And then when that gas project shut down, majority of that workforce left, and it left the property market in tatters there for many years, and it's now basically fully recovered to where it was all those years ago. So you need to understand who and what's driving the market. I think that's really going to enable you to understand if this is a good time to buy as well. So look at those different metrics there, guys, and and then make an evaluation whether or not it's a good time to buy in that market and go and get the job done from there. The next one is pretty straightforward in terms of market size. So when we're analyzing this data, what we're trying to understand is whether the market size is large enough to allow for investment stability and potential capital growth upside. So let's say we're looking at a market like Rockhampton, for example, that has over 100,000 people when you include Yeppoon and then some of the other catchments around the immediate area. 100,000 people, right? So it has north of 30,000 dwellings. So that's a pretty healthy market there, I think, with a good population size, a good number of households, a lot of sales volume happening in the area. And there's, due to that sort of population base, there's going to be a lot of buy demand. Whereas, let's say, 3 hours west of Rockhampton and somewhere like Mowa, for example, or Claremont, these little smaller sub-regional hubs, you're looking at totally different markets there, and those market sizes are small in terms of their households, in terms of their population size, in terms of how many buyers and sellers there are active at any given time. So looking at the market size, I think, is going to really help you figure out, where you may or may not invest. And even when you start to play off these different regional hubs against each other, obviously Townsville is the biggest regional hub in Queensland, close to 250,000 people, followed by Cairns, followed by Mackay, followed by Rockhampton, followed by Bundaberg. So all of those different regional hubs also have their different sizes in terms of population-based number of households, sales volume, buy demand. So it's up to you then to figure out which market you feel as though is going to be the best for you to give you that stability and capital growth upside. But yeah, guys, look at the market size. I think that's going to really help you figure out where you may or may not invest as well. The next thing you want to dive in and have a look at is the economy. So this is very important, guys, the economy. And when we analyze economic data, what we are trying to understand is whether the overall economy is growing and is healthy. And we want to also understand what are its key industries and drivers to ensure ongoing economic stability and growth. So when you dive in and try and look at the nature of the economies that you're looking to invest in, or these areas that have an economy in place, what you want to look at is these key pillars here. So number one, the GDP output. And the GDP output is basically the amount of capital being produced in that marketplace. And what we want to understand and ascertain there is that GDP output growing, and is that economy making a net contribution to the state's GDP output? So you can find any of this data, guys, by simply searching Rockhampton GDP, Cairns GDP, and you'll be able to look at what that track record is and how that GDP is performing. And obviously, if you have a GDP that's growing, that's when you know you have a rather healthy economy there, and the economy is growing over time as well. So that's a good thing. You don't want to find economies that are retracting, stagnating, or going back. That could mean that unstable economy right now and then could certainly have a flow-on effect into the housing market, because often if the economy is booming, money's running hot in the area, people are moving in, people are employed, money is plenty, that often trickles down into the housing market. So it's very important that we look at the GDP output of a market. The next pillar you want to jump in and have a look at is key industries. So what is the economic makeup of that area? What are the industries that are driving that economy? And what you'll find in certain markets is that certain markets are driven by certain industries. And often, if you have a market only driven by one or two key industries, that can generally open you up to some form of risk, particularly if those key industries were to go south. And we've obviously seen that in markets like Mackay, in markets like Gladstone, where in the past, the mining sector, they were heavily geared towards mining, right? And when there was an economic downturn in mining, those property markets went on to take a hit because of those industries. They took a hit. So you want to make sure you look at the economic makeup of the area and understand what is driving it. I like to say, if there is a really big private and government sector there that's not necessarily in one particular industry, you're well buffered from any economic shocks in the area. So when there is a good government public service sector there, good primary industries like beef, like health, like education, and then obviously a private sector as well, then you're going to buffer yourself quite well from any economic shocks. If you look at the makeup of, let's say, if we were to just sort of run through each one of them, just off the top of my head, Cairns is probably by and large mainly a tourist-led economy. So tourism does make up a large portion of Cairns. So you have to be considerate of that if you are investing in somewhere like Cairns. But it also has a big government service sector. So Cairns acts as a major regional hub that services the wider sort of Cape York and tropical North Queensland region. So it has sort of a nice backbone there, despite it being a highly sort of tourism geared economy. Townsville, very much like Cairns, has a really good government services backbone, but it was also backed by mining as well as government services in the military. So the military is a major sort of industry in that town that gives it really good stability. You go down to Mackay. Mackay is really still very much geared towards mining, but it also has a nice government service sector. And moving into some agriculture there as well and farming. So it still has quite a nice backbone. You go to somewhere like Rockhampton, you're looking again at major government service hub for the central Queensland catchment. A lot of the tier one companies tend to set up their sub-regional offices here, or not, they set up their regional offices. So all the big companies like BHP Billiton, Bravus Mining, etc., they have their regional headquarters in places like Rocky. So it has a nice corporate sector here as well, but obviously it has beef as well, really driving that economy, farming as well. And then you go down to places like Bundaberg, large agriculture industry there as well, and a nice government service sector there. So have a look at the key industries of these different areas and see what's driving them and make a decision from there. Have a look at the unemployment data. So the unemployment data is a good sort of measurement on how the economy is in terms of its overall health. And obviously, if that unemployment rate is high, then the economy may not be as healthy as you think it is. So have a look at that economic data. And if it's generally below the national average, that's when you know you're in a really good, stable market. So have a look at that data. And then lastly, we're looking at the investment that's coming in to that area, both public and private. So infrastructure spend, private investment that's creating business, that's creating jobs, that's creating stimulus for that economy. So you want to look at what that investment looks like per capita and start to benchmark that against other areas. And obviously those markets with areas where there is a higher level of stimulus, they tend to be the markets that better perform overall with their housing markets. So you can jump on the Queensland Big Builds. It's a website, the Queensland government website, where you can actually look at different infrastructure projects that are happening across Queensland and get an idea on their dollar value, the jobs that are being created, and how it's going to stimulate the economy. With the private sector, very sort of hard to gauge what's going on from the private sector, but you can generally follow most of the private sector investments with the Chamber of Commerce departments in these different areas. They do the publications on how the economy is going and what some of the areas that are being driven in terms of key industries, and then you'll see the different investments that are being made in, let's say, technology, farming, mining, etc., that are privately led and not government led. So if you check out those different Chamber of Commerce reports of these different markets that you're investigating, you'll see where the private investment is also coming from. So if you just look at those four pillars and use it to understand what's going on in that economy to determine if it's healthy, if it's a stable market, and if it's growing, then you've got to be in a really good position there when you're going to invest, guys. Now, the next one you want to have a look at is population. So the population of an area, which is very different to market size because we're taking a more in-depth look at people and their movement. So when analyzing population data, what we're trying to understand here overall, what are the trends and what are the net population numbers? So these are sort of the key pillars that we're looking at here. Number one is the population size. So is there a lot of people in that market? And of that population size, what percentage or portion of them are active home buyers or in that home buying window? Obviously, if you have a very young market where majority of the people that live there are below 20, they're generally not going to be the people that are going to be transacting. If you have a market where majority of the people that live there are over 70, most of those demographic may not be transacting or buying real estate. If most of the people are between sort of 30 to 50, that's probably where you know that sweet spot exists for a lot of people that can still buy and sell real estate. So you want to look at that overall population size, and obviously the greater the population, the more market depth that gives you in that particular area. Population trends. So what we're going to look at is what are the different trends that are happening in the population space. So where are people moving from, or where are people coming from, or where are people moving to from that area that you're even trying to investigate? Because what you'll find is that people are moving to and from areas all the time. So for example, Cairns, particularly during COVID-19, it had a net population increase of 13,000 residents over a 24-month period. and majority of those people came from New South Wales and Victoria. So we had major net numbers moving into one portion of the state, putting a lot of upward pressure on house prices. And that's when you saw a lot of the well-desirable suburbs, particularly on the northern beaches of Cairns, skyrocket during that COVID-19 era. And those population trends really had an impact on the housing market there. And you can generally get this population trend data from places like Economic ID. They're a free portal online. They're going to give you a full breakdown on the population, how it's growing year on year, and what the overall net numbers are. So how many people are moving in, how many people are moving out, and what people are left there each year in terms of net numbers. And overall, we want to establish that the net population is growing overall. So the population is growing at a greater rate than people are leaving. So there's always a surplus of people propping up that population base each year. So if you are investigating a market, be sure to dive in and check out the population. And what you want to understand is its trends and its net numbers overall. Now, another thing you need to be looking at, guys, when selecting an area is its affordability, its level of affordability. And there are different layers to this, guys. I'm going to go through that in a sec. So when we analyze affordability data, what we're trying to understand is whether the market is affordable for locals, intra-regional buyers, and interstate buyers, because obviously that level of affordability is going to determine whether or not that median house price has the ability to keep rising, because buyers still can transact in the market due to its affordability. So, for example, one of the things we've noticed, particularly on the Capricorn Coast in central Queensland, in a market called Yeppoon. So Yeppoon had a median house price of $450,000, going back 48 months ago, particularly during COVID-19. And then over the last few years, the median house prices have soared up to around 600,000. But it's very hard to get a 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom property in one of the well-located suburbs on the Capricorn Coast in Yeppoon for under, let's say, $650,000. Now, there is a lot of local aggravation there to say, well, particularly come from the local market, that a lot of locals are priced out of that market. So what's going to keep that median house price surging along is the affordability, and the affordability is relative. So what we're finding in Yeppoon, that despite there being a slowdown in local market transactions from local buyers, it's still a very affordable and cheap market for intra-regional buyers, people that are moving up from the Sunshine Coast, from the Gold Coast, where they're looking at a $1 million median house price entry point into the market, and they come to places like Yeppoon on the Capricorn Coast and they get more bang for buck. So the market at $600,000, $650,000 in the Capricorn Coast, very cheap still relative to the Sunshine Coast and the Gold Coast. So we're seeing that still continue to drive up that median house price. And then obviously from the interstate buyers as well, a lot of people still moving into those lifestyle markets like Yeppoon from Victoria and New South Wales, and often buying sight unseen. And again, they can still afford that. That $650,000 price point is very cheap relative to what they could get in those southern markets. So affordability is always relative, guys. So when we look at the affordability, what we're doing is making various comparisons. So we're looking at the median house price comparison to the local market. We want to make sure that there's still affordability in the market for locals, because obviously locals, you want to make sure that there's still enough of them transacting in the marketplace to give it a healthy base. But we're also comparing that to regional markets and interstate markets. We're looking at the median house price relative to household incomes. So in markets like Sydney and Melbourne, where the median house price is, let's say, around $1.1 million, I think it works out to be on average 6 times the average household income, maybe even 12 times. Don't quote me on that, but I know it's quite high, right? So what we want to make sure is that the median house price still fits within a healthy portion of household income. So income to household price ratio is healthy. It's only sitting at around 4x or 3x. And if it's up above 6 to 10, then that's generally getting well and truly into the unaffordable space. So we're looking at that income to house price ratio. We're looking at the affordability for investors as well. So we want to play in markets where there's still a lot of healthy level of investor transactions. And what we find is that when suburbs get to, let's say, over $700,000, or markets that just get over $700,000, for example, like Kansas pushing up close to what, about 650 median house price now. So it started to become an even unaffordable market for property investors. So we want to look at markets also that have the ability where investors can still come in and prop up that median house price as well. And a healthy level of investor transaction sits around that sort of 30% of total transactions. And you want that investor market to also create that additional competition to put upward pressure on house prices so you can continue to get ongoing capital growth as well. So when you find a market that's generally not affordable for those investors, that's probably when you know it's probably not going to be a market with a lot of stimulus from that particular faculty, and that could be an overall risk, or it could certainly slow down its overall growth rate, and it may not move as fast as a market that has a combination of owner occupiers and investors. So yeah, guys, when you're looking at an area, look at its affordability and start to benchmark its affordability across all of these different pillars here. Now, the next thing you want to be looking at is lifestyle drivers. So, in that particular marketplace slash region, what's really driving it there in terms of lifestyle? Is there good lifestyle amenity that appeals to people? Because at the end of the day, we are people and we need to also have good lifestyle amenity and drivers in place that keeps us sane, that keeps us sound. So, when analyzing lifestyle data, and this is more of a qualitative than quantitative data, right? What we're trying to understand is whether or not this region, in terms of lifestyle, makes people want to live there, right? So, what are the key things that are making what people want to move into that area and making people want to stay in that area? And we know that, particularly during COVID-19, Townsville, Cairns were very big lifestyle markets, right? Where people wanted to move and fast track retirement, grey nomad living, move into these areas, right? Because it offered lifestyle. It had a warmer climate. It had the pristine beaches, the quiet sort of regional area, not like a busy capital city. So all of those sort of key things can play a role in how a market performs as well. And when you're looking at a market and you're trying to understand what are its drivers, what are its lifestyle drivers, here's what you can look for, right? So you want to look at, all right, what climate is it, right? Is it a good climate that appeals to people that want to, let's say, escape the cold? Or is it a colder market? Who's going to move into colder markets? So is it a good climate? And obviously, that sort of ties closely with environment. So what does the environment look like relative to the climate? And obviously, places like North Queensland, for example, you have a sort of warmer climate, humidity, but then the environment is subtropical slash tropical. So Townsville subtropical, Cairns is tropical. So you got the rainforest, you got the reef, you've got the beaches, etc. around that immediate area. And then places like Townsville, that's subtropical. You don't have the sort of high humidity. You have more dry heat, and then you also have not rainforest. You have savanna, but you still have access to beaches and the reef as well. So climate and environment, you also want to look at, what that looks like in those different areas that you propose to invest in, because that can be a really big lifestyle driver. Obviously, it's size as well. So people move into areas because they're quiet. They want to escape, let's say, a busy city centre like Brisbane, Sydney, or Melbourne. They want to move to quiet regional locations. So its size definitely plays a portion as well. And obviously, you can get into some smaller beachside communities along the Queensland East Coast as well, and they tend to also be quite popular because they appeal to that sort of retirement market as well. Another lifestyle driver is work opportunities. So people move to a certain area because there is a big employer in that town or there's a big industry. So that tends to be a big lifestyle driver as well. So particularly around Mackay and Bundaberg, you have a big sort of cohort of farming and mining. So farming in Bundaberg, so a lot of people tend to move into that particular area for those sort of work opportunities. And those people that are interested in moving into mining tend to sort of be based in and around the Mackay slash Whitsundays area. So work opportunities can also be a lifestyle driver. And then the last thing is retirement obviously. So retirement, everyone's different, each to their own when it comes to what type of retirement they want to live. But you want to try and figure out from a qualitative perspective how many people are moving into there to retire to enjoy the climate, the environment, because of the size, etc., the makeup of the town. So if you look at all of these different pillars and you evaluate what's driving that market in terms of lifestyle, I think you're going to really enable yourself to pick a location there that's ticking most of these boxes. And when you can tick most of these boxes, I think you're going to get some really good upside potential when it comes to investing. Now, I spoke to this earlier on, but this is also very important. So, budget slash value for money. So, when you're analyzing this data, what you're trying to understand and evaluate here is what region gets you the best value for money with the budget you have. So, as I said, we work with clients all the time that come to us and they say, "Hey, look, Troy, I've got 450,000, I've got 500,000, I've got 600,000." So we then, use that budget by and large as a means to also pinpoint where might be the best location to invest in based on budget slash value for money. So what we're looking at a micro level then when we're sort of going into these regional markets and even specific suburbs, but when we keep it sort of regional, what we're doing is, okay, well, let's say you got $500,000. Let's say we look at a market like Bundaberg. What location could you get into Bundaberg for 500,000? Like, what are the different suburbs? Can you still get into a blue chip suburb in Bundaberg with 500,000? And if you can, what does the build quality of that property looks like? What's the build type? Generally, if you want a low maintenance brick home on like a 422 configuration, then it might be actually quite hard to get uh, a property of that sort in a blue chip location for $500,000 in Bundaberg. So we use this framework to really go, well, maybe for that $500,000 budget, it's probably not going to get you the best property in Bundaberg. However, in Rockhampton, let's have a look. 500,000 could probably still get you into quite a pretty good blue chip type location. It actually gets you something from a build quality point of view pretty good. From a build type point of view, you could probably get uh, a brick-based hardy plank home across 2 stories on 600 square meters, which is land content here, which is good. Configuration, you can probably get a 3x2 still for 500,000, so that's good. You can probably get something that's not too old as well, not 50 or 40 plus years old. You can probably get something that's built in the last 15 to 25 years. So this is kind of the framework that we use for each client that comes through when we're figuring out, where they're going to get the best bang for buck. Location, build quality, build type, configuration and aspect. So the configuration is pretty much how many bedrooms and bathrooms it has, and the aspect is about like, does it have views? Does it sit in a good location? Corner block aspect, for example, does it have side access? All of those sort of key little things that make your property slightly better as an investment. Age, we're looking at its age. How old is the property, and that's going to really determine its quality as well. Often, some of the older properties in different locations tend to be, not that well built or not in good condition, so that might lend itself to a property that may not be good for someone that's looking for a set and forget buy and hold type strategy, because you might look at an older property that might need renovations or total redevelopment there. So we're looking at its age, and then obviously the land content as well. So let's say a $500,000 property, let's say, might get you into a blue chip location. I'm using another example here, but I'm using it from the land content perspective. It might be, let's say, good quality. It might get you a good location, in Mackay for $500,000. The build quality might be good, the build type might be good, the configuration might be good, the age might be okay, but then when we look at the land content, you can only get, let's say, like a 450 square meter block of land that has a 4 bedroom, 2 bathroom property. So it's ticking majority of those other boxes, but when it comes to land content, it's just not ticking that box. So that would be a no deal for us. So we want to try and make sure that the property that we pick is ticking majority of these boxes, and that's how we're able to substantiate whether or not you're getting good value for money for the budget that you have. So I'd be looking at each location that you can get into for $500,000, what the build quality is for $500,000, what the build type is for $500,000, the aspect, the configuration, the age, and the land content. I think if you can tick all of those boxes and get the best bang, you'll get the best bang for buck, I think. And that's how you're going to really be able to determine it and understand if you're getting good value for money in that area. And that's going to allow you to then get potentially the best upside. Because if you buy the right property at the right price and you feel as though you're getting good value, you're starting in a good position to get good upside potential. But I find investors, a lot of investors, they come into the market with 500 grand and they often don't buy in the best location. They often buy the property that isn't the best build quality. They often buy a property that doesn't have the right land content. They often buy a property that doesn't have the right configuration for, let's say, that budget. So you need to be making sure it's ticking majority of these boxes, guys. And the more boxes you can tick, I think the better your investment is going to be. So this one here, I think this is one of the utmost important things that you need to consider if you're looking to invest in a particular region, because all of the other things that I've touched on earlier could be going absolutely great. The economy could be humming. It could have all these amazing lifestyle drivers. It's ticking all the boxes, right? But if it's a market that has an overabundance of supply or it's oversaturated with supply, then that's going to be an issue, right, for capital growth, because they say the enemy of capital growth is supply. Because if you think about it, if you buy a $500,000 house and there's another 300 of those same $500,000 houses coming into that market every 6 months, and it's actually outpacing by demand, then that creates an imbalance between supply and demand. There's going to be an over level of supply, so that in turn will slow down the market naturally. So new supply is a key pillar, I think, guys, you need to be looking at when you're trying to figure out what area to invest in. Now, when we analyze new supply data, what we're trying to understand here is whether this is a market with a supply pipeline that creates an oversupply of new properties, ultimately staggering the market, right? So there's a couple of different things that you can look at to determine what the supply pipeline looks like. What we like to look at is number one, land releases. So obviously, land releases get, well, councils and state governments, etc., release land, and developers, they grab those lands, releases, and then they go through a development process then of getting them subdivided or getting them developed for residential subdivision or high-rise building. So we want to make sure that the land release velocity isn't high. It's pretty tight, and the local area there's quite a lid on land releases. Whereas you go to markets like let's say the Sunshine Coast, the Moreton Bay area, there's just land release after land release happening from the state government, from local councils to cater for like that massive sort of sprawl that's happening there. So you don't necessarily want to be in markets like that, right? Particularly where there's going to be a whole bunch of new supply potentially in that pipeline, because that creates a lot of competition for your property to be leased at a premium and to be bought at a premium, and obviously to get that capital appreciation over time. So look for land releases, guys. Look for building approval data. So you can get building approval data on Economics ID for free, or you can jump on any local government website and look at what their building approval pipeline looks like. And obviously you want to look at what the building pipeline looks like now and what has it been in previous years, because often you can find a discrepancy between sort of now, what the data is telling you now versus previous years. Because with building approval data, what you need to be careful of is sometimes there is a bit of a lag, right? So the developers, they obviously go through a building approval process, but from when the building is approved or the development is approved, it generally takes 3 or 4 years before we see an end product. So building approvals, let's say, let's say you're looking at data right now for a market, the building approval might be very low right now, but for the last 4 years, it's been very, very high. So it might look like there's not a whole bunch of new supply coming on the market right now, but 4 years ago, there's been a massive buildup, right? So that new supply is coming onto the market within the next sort of 1 to 4 years. So that despite the data being low right now, there's still going to be a whole bunch of new stock coming on the market because over the last 4 years, as those building approval numbers have been high. So when you go and look at that data, be sure to check out, what the trend has been prior to the point in time that you're investigating that area. Look at house and land package sales. So we've noticed in and around Townsville, there's been a bunch of house and land packages pop up now. New estates and subdivisions sort of popped up in places like Burdale, Bushland, Beach, Bowley Plains. So obviously that creates ongoing competition for your property. So they say again, supply is the enemy of capital growth. So you want to look at, just jump on realestate.com or domain and filter house and land package sales, and you'll be able to sort of understand very quickly if there's a big sort of supply pipeline of house and land packages. And often when there is a whole bunch of new house and land packages, that can be a market, that could definitely slow down capital growth, that's for sure. So be sure to check that out. And then we look at available land supply as well. So you look at markets like Cairns, for example, like Cairns is pretty much running out of land, right? So land becomes more scarce then in certain parts of Cairns, and obviously you can then target those suburbs where land is more scarce, where at a macro level, these markets are running out of land, then they're probably going to get some really good capital growth upside there. So Cairns, if you look at that market, it's flanked by ocean on one side and flanked by mountainsides on the other, and it's pretty much been built out across most of the well-located parts of Cairns, and now you start to move into like the southern corridor of Cairns where there is available land. Look like markets like Townsville, Mackay, there's a whole flurry of land availability around it as well, so that can be a potential long-term concern, but you do need to look at the available land versus what the land usage is as well, because what you'll find in and around Townsville, in and around Mackay, they might look like a whole bunch of new land there available for development, but in fact it's swampland, it's environmental zone, it's flood area, etc. So there actually is no scope for dwellings to be developed there because of that land type, right? That environmental factors associated with that land. So go back again, look at all of these components and establish what the supply pipeline looks like. Because as I said, it could tick all the other boxes, but if supply is aplenty, then growth is not going to happen in that market, guys. So check that out, and I think you'll be just fine. All right, now the last thing that we like to look at when figuring out what is the best region to invest is we just have a look at risks, right? And when we analyze the risk related data, what we do is try to give weighting to various potential risks that could disrupt this marketplace. And we like to look at risk through these various lenses here. So the first one is environmental risk. So obviously, markets, particularly up in North Queensland, like the Cairns, the Townsvilles, the Port Douglas, the environmental risk there is cyclones, right? Cyclones are a big environmental risk, and even flooding, right? So certain markets across Queensland are subject to flooding more than others, right? So you have to consider those environmental risks as well. And we like to think that if the market is more prone to environmental risks like floods, like cyclones, that actually that spills over here into the cost side of things. So actually holding a property actually costs more in this market due to the fact that the risk is a lot higher to hold a property there. So Townsville, for example, in the flood affected suburbs, you're looking at north of $7,000 to $8,000 in insurance just to hold those properties. So it makes owning an investment there not viable at all in some of the flood affected areas. And then just in general, like some of the areas that are subject to cyclone and flood that may not be in the immediate flood areas, you're still paying a slight premium there due to that area having a poor historical track record. So yeah, that is one risk that we consider, guys. And I think you just need to give weighting to, whether or not that's a deal breaker or not. We're looking at the social risks as well. So what could go wrong socially there? Like, is there social unrest in that immediate area? Is everyone happy? Is there anything that could disrupt that sort of area slash market from a social perspective, we're looking at economic risk as well. And again, generally, if you're buying in markets that is only geared to one specific industry, where the economy is dependent on one specific industry, if something happens to that one industry, what does that mean then for that economy and that property market? So I want to give weighting to that when we're looking at different markets. And obviously, places like Mackay have a higher weighting when it comes to how diversify their economy. So the economy, let's say Mackay has a huge gearing towards mining, and that is a large portion of its economy. So what happens then if the economy shits itself, or the mining, sorry, sector shits itself there? What does that lead to? So we give weighting to that, and that's going to really help us make an informed decision around where we invest. Political risk as well. Political risk just comes back to even at a local government level, you find that some uh, local councils, some local governments are favourable to investors, particularly around their local bylaws when it comes to Airbnb investments and things like that, holiday letting, short-term holiday letting. So political risk could also be a factor as well. And even at a macro level, when you're picking different states have different laws around capital gains, around property tax, etc. So political risk, we want to make sure we look at that and minimize that risk as much as possible and give weighting to whether or not there is political risk in that area. Legal risk, also we're looking at whether or not there is legal risk, and it also comes back to things like local government bylaws and whether or not that could affect you as a property owner in owning an investment in that area. So you want to be considerate on legal risk, and then obviously the costs as well. So what's the cost of doing business and owning property in that area? Is that a risk of going up as well? And you don't obviously want that to go up, particularly if you're 1 or 2 years into owning a property. Something happens there where the local governments put their rates up, insurance companies put their rates up, and it makes holding an investment there unaffordable. Obviously, that's hard to foresee, but it's good to sort of get some baseline numbers around what it costs to do business and hold property in these markets, and that's obviously going to give you some sanity around, not sanity, but it's going to give you an idea of what it is like to own property there, and then you could set some different scenarios around if costs were to increase, and then you can see what buffers you need to put in place there to hold property. But yeah, guys, looking at all these risks and giving weight to these risks, I think will help you minimize that potential downside that comes with buying in these various different regional markets. Woo! All right, family. You made it all the way to the end. Look, thank you for tuning in today. I really hope that's given you some value in helping select a region to invest in. And as I said, this is the framework that we follow for all of our clients that come to us, and we're shortlisting where might be the best place for them to invest at a regional level. So my name is Troy Bassini, guys. I am the owner and head of research of Life Buyers Agency. We do have Tropical Life Buyers Agency servicing Cairns, Townsville, and Port Douglas up in North Queensland. Then we have Capricorn Life Buyers Agency servicing Gladstone, Bundaberg, Rockhampton, and Mackay in Central Queensland. You can check us out on these websites or give us a call on this number, particularly if you fall into the category of a struggling investor or home buyer or an investor looking to get a really good result. We generally tell our clients that we outperform the market, and that's been our sort of value proposition and offer to clients. We do buy a lot of our property off market as well, and in fact this week alone we've seen, I'd say, 10 to 12 off market properties, and we've secured 4 for clients. So we have plenty of access to really good opportunities in these markets as well. And we're on the ground as well. So we've got a team of people across all of these locations, and we have the expert local market knowledge. So yeah, guys, give us a call if you fall into any of those categories. But again, thank you for tuning into this video, guys, and I'll see you on the next one.